Hello and welcome back. My name is Jackson Kent, and today I'm excited to be bringing you all back to another episode of the UP Economics Club web series, where we bring on alumni to talk about their education at UP, what they found themselves doing afterwards, and any insights they may have to offer in between. Today I'm excited to be bringing on Madeline Baron. Madeline, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Jackson. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Madeline Baron. I'm a project manager at a company called ECONorthwest. I graduated from UP in 2009 with a global business major, which I don't think exists anymore, and a mathematics minor. So I graduated in 2009, which was in the last recession, and I just want to give a shout out to anyone who's graduating soon that, you'll do fine, things recover. Don't worry too much because it happens in the past and it's going to happen again. And, there's plenty of jobs out there. So just, keeping your head up is really important. But I graduated in 2009 and worked in the finance industry for a couple of years. I really only got the one job offer and took it. I had a finance emphasis on my global business major. So I was a stock analyst for 3 years and decided that I wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful with my career. So I made a switch and went to grad school and studied public policy. And so while business and finance is directly relevant to economics, my public policy degree, and I went to Georgetown in Washington, D.C., that was really what got me more interested in the public sector and economics and how these macro level decisions are made and how they affect our everyday lives.
Definitely. So here at the UP Economics Club, it's all about finding something to do meaningfully, right? So you decided to study public policy, and with your finance background, you found that economic analysis was something that kind of fit the niche of what you wanted to do. So tell me a bit about ECONorthwest, what it's all about, what you do there, anything you have to offer on that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly right. Public policy combined with business, combined with finance, it blends right into economics, and economics is everywhere. That's one of the questions, one of the ideas we have on our website, and one of the driving missions of ECONorthwest is that economic questions are everywhere, and we seek out to answer them. ECONorthwest is an economics consulting company. We're headquartered in Portland, but we have offices in Seattle and throughout Oregon, and a new office in Los Angeles. So we're about 60 people. We've been around since the 70s in the Portland area. And consulting is a really interesting, wild, and sometimes intense field to be in. So we are seen as economic experts in a lot of different areas. My area that I work in is called urban systems, planning and transportation. So most things relevant to land use, real estate, and development. I particularly work on our housing team, and this came out of my master's degree, where I got really interested in affordable housing and housing as an avenue for changing people's lives. I was working in finance. I didn't feel like that was very valuable for me in terms of just my personal goals in life. And so when I was writing my thesis for grad school, I got very interested in affordable housing and how a stable, safe house could be the foundation for other positive changes in people's lives and help eradicate poverty and health outcomes, school outcomes. A lot of that is tied back to housing. And so at ECONorthwest, oftentimes we work with a lot of different sectors. We work in the public sector, private sector developers. We work with nonprofits and community organizations, all people who are trying to answer questions about how the world could be working better, how things could be operating better, more efficiently, more cost effective, resulting in better outcomes for people. So as a consulting firm, we go get projects. Sometimes it's through requests for proposals, and we submit an application to win a project. That's oftentimes with the government sector, with government clients. And our government clients are typically cities, counties, the state. We don't do a lot at the federal level, at least not yet. And so we go after these projects and then staff our teams based on who has the skills, who has the capacity, and who has the interest in working on these different types of projects. And I mentioned that I'm on our housing team and our urban systems kind of transportation and development team, but we also work in natural resources, asking questions like, what are the costs and benefits of removing a dam on a river? Or restoring, salmon habitat. What does that do for society in terms of recreational use and the value of the fishery, habitat? We also work in economic education and social policies with underlying assumptions about economic benefits and impacts to society. And then, of course, we work in just business analytics, where we're helping companies decide when to hire, who to hire, how to grow, when they should deploy their capital, and things of that nature.
Definitely. That all sounds awesome and very much up our alley here at the UP Economics Club. I do have one question for you. So you mentioned earlier when you were talking about, say, the implications of restoring the salmon population, or what would happen if you were to tear down a dam, I think it was. I have this ongoing conversation with my buddies about how do we do accounting for externalities of events. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed, particularly in 21st century economics, is a field of accounting that accounts for things that are external to how things might affect the surrounding economy, how it affects the players essentially. So what do you think about this field of external accounting or accounting for externalities? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, and externalities is such an important consideration in the field of economics. Every action that we make has consequences, and most of them can be measured. Most of them can be measured financially, or in an impact to the labor market, or some of these kind of obvious impacts that our decisions have. But then there's oftentimes these unknown or expected consequences that are important to factor in. So those externalities are a vital component of making solid decisions. And that's why everything that we do and how we serve our clients, everything has a foundation in economic decision making and economic policy choices. So understanding the true nature of your decision and those trade-offs, and what the externalities are, how they can possibly be quantified, and sometimes they can't, is really important. And that's how we like to advise our clients, both public sector and private sector, and how to make solid decisions based in data.
Awesome, definitely. It's great to hear about how we need to weigh the factors of how the decisions we make can and maybe, like, within a margin, affect things we're not necessarily thinking about. Always a very important thing to talk about in economics. But moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about your education at UP, I think. So tell me, what did you see yourself doing after graduation, and how far has that vision shifted from the reality of the career you've taken today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think my undergraduate self would be pretty happy with where I am now. I'm really satisfied in my job, and it's very challenging. And I have never worked with such a great set of ambitious but fun people, really smart crowd that I'm with. So I really like my job, and I really respect my colleagues. When I was in undergrad, I expected to work in nonprofit management. I always knew I wanted to do something meaningful internally with my degree. And I thought, nonprofits, they don't have profits, but they still need to run, with economic, principles and accounting, and they need to run like a business, even if they just reinvest their profits back in the community. I had an internship in undergrad with a nonprofit in their finance department, and didn't get a job in that area. Like I said, I graduated in the recession, so some of those jobs were a little bit hard to find. But I did work in a nonprofit after grad school. So I was getting my master's in public policy and had my thesis on affordable housing. And so when I came back to Portland, I worked for an affordable housing nonprofit development company, someone who goes and builds these properties. And it was a great experience working in the field and getting up to speed on all the nuances of affordable housing, because it's a very complex industry with a lot of strings attached to the funding that helps bring the rents down, basically. And I kind of realized that the nonprofit sector wasn't really where my personality lied. I got to experience it. I got to experience it in Washington, D.C., in some internships there as well. And ultimately, I realized that I could do the same type of work, but work for a profit-oriented company and a private sector company, and still, make that positive impact on society. So for me, I feel like it's a win-win.
Definitely. It's good to hear that you found what you wanted to do while you're an undergrad today and working in the public sector after going through the private sector and saying, hey, this isn't for me. Or no, you're still working you're still working in the private sector, correct?
Yeah.
You studied kind of public policy and you went through both of the fields and you came out to something that fits your mold. So that's good to hear. I do want to go in a little segment. We've been talking a lot about how you focus on affordable housing. So I'm kind of interested, what might you say the next step towards universal affordable housing may be, at least in the regions that you're looking at and working on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has actually shed a lot of light on just how vulnerable a lot of households are.
Definitely.
We have an affordability crisis here in Portland and really up and down the coasts. It's driven by a large imbalance in the number of people who want to live in these areas and the number of housing units we've actually built. In the state of Oregon, we've only built about 65 housing units for every 100 people that have either moved out of their parents' home or moved here in the last decade.
Right.
And when you don't produce housing, it's kind of like a game of musical chairs where the price just keeps going up. So universal affordable housing, I think actually the stimulus checks that have been sent out from the federal government, just the tax credit for every family and every child, that is towards the direction of a universal basic income. It's really interesting because we get food supplements, we get Medicaid health supplement from the government, and we also get disability. If you have some of these, if you meet certain criteria, you're able to get help from the federal government for your health care, for your food. But housing is not one of those criteria. And it's really interesting because the way we've structured our society to build wealth is through housing. And as long as you have housing as your biggest asset, and if you're a homeowner, you want that asset to grow, you want the value to go up. As long as we've structured our society this way, it's kind of the exact opposite of affordable housing. If one person wants their value to go up and another person needs the value to come down in order to afford it, it's kind of a zero-sum game. So it's really up to policymakers and up to, I think it's going to take drastic change in order to make either an entitlement program where everyone gets some benefit that goes towards housing costs, or a restructuring of denser housing in the areas people really want to live in. It's going to take some pretty big restructuring, and particularly in people's mindsets, for affordable housing to really become a universally accessible thing.
Definitely. That sounds like a very tricky puzzle you're dealing with there. So people want the value of their property to go up, and people want to acquire that property for less price. So you have that zero-sum game you're talking about. Interesting incentives and structures are set up there. So yes, very tricky all in all. Is kind of what I'm coming to here.
Well, and a lot of what we work on in economics, we solve these, we try to solve these wicked problems, but it comes down to human behavior, and behavioral economics is obviously a fascinating field that's really grown in the past 10 or 20 years. And so incentivizing people to act in their best interest, that's why we have matched 401k programs, that's why we have structured, welfare and other types of assistance programs as incentives towards other goals. So it can be done. It's just an extra tricky problem because we aren't making more land. When you have land constraints and you have excess demand and not enough housing units, it's a market. The prices are going to go up.
Yeah, definitely. So that's great. Moving on a little bit, I think, let's talk a little bit more about you. The next question is, what's the biggest difference between the professional you are today and the professional you thought you would want to be while you were still an undergrad?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was just out of undergrad and working in the finance sector, I thought I would move away from Portland and get into a bigger city. I did that for grad school. Like I said, I moved to Washington, D.C., but I pretty quickly realized that Portland is an amazing place to live. It's got the great weather and climate. It's got a great culture. People aren't quite as career obsessed over here as they are in other places.
Right.
And then we've got the natural beauty. We've got the mountains and the ocean and the rivers, and it's all really accessible. And actually, part of what we were talking about earlier, when we're not we're protecting our natural lands via our urban growth boundary, the Portland area. So, we have trade-offs when it comes to how much land we have to build on, and yet we have these amazing forests and farmland and protected areas that are not seeing that development. So for people here, that's an important trade-off, and a lot of what attracts people to Portland is that proximity to natural areas. So I think the biggest change is that when I was an undergrad, I probably thought I was gonna move away, and I did, but I came right back.
Awesome. Portland brought you back. That's good to hear. It is a beautiful place, and it seems like it follows suit well with what you do in terms of, upholding a good lifestyle for its constituents. So that's good to hear. I know we're kind of going back and forth between you and your industry and your career. Kind of going back and forth, but I'm gonna go back to your industry really quickly. How has your industry been affected by the pandemic we're going through, and what kind of changes can we expect coming out of it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's obviously top of a lot of people's minds. So we've had some basic changes. We're all working remotely. For my company, it was a very easy transition. We have everything on laptops and everything kind of stored in the clouds. So plus the fact that we have multiple offices and we're already kind of plugged into one another remotely in that way. So that's a big change. I don't expect to go back to my office for several more months, and even then it'll be on a limited basis. We have held all of our hiring decisions. So, our company weathered the 2008-2009 storm pretty well. It is interesting because a lot of our work comes from government contracts, and so we aren't seeing a huge hit in our projects right now, but what they learned in the last recession was that once government sees the impact, so right now there's a lot of businesses and a lot of people who are out of work, businesses that are closed, and those people are not generating revenue that generates taxes for government. So a lot of our projects are government funded, and when we're gonna feel the impact would be in a few years, where the taxes collected now translate into fewer revenues and projects from government in about 1 or 2 years. So our company has its eye on the horizon. We're not seeing a humongous impact now. In fact, because we're considered a thought leader in the economics scene here, we have had an increase in the number of projects we're doing right now, most of them relating to what's going on, what's happening in the labor market. Some governments have come to us to ask us to help evaluate their budgets and evaluate the risk that they see on the horizon. So we've got a small uptick in COVID-related projects right now, and we're also quite flexible. One of the things that our company can do is transfer staff from, development and housing and pro-growth and cyclical projects that have to do with a really strong labor market, and we can quickly shift into economic development and workforce development and getting people back to work. And so we have a lot of the same staff and same principles that we would apply in a recessionary market, where we're focused on producing growth and spurring growth and getting people back to work.
Definitely. All very good stuff. But then again, we have COVID related things that we're studying right now. So those are always keeping us busy, and working from home isn't all that bad, which is what we all found out. Madeline, I think I might have one more question for you. For someone that wants to do what you do, what is something that you would do in undergrad right now to take the first step towards doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had a math minor in undergrad, and that really helped me solidify my quantitative skills. And actually, my public policy degree was really quantitative. It's not the same as an economics degree or an economics master's, but we had many required quantitative classes that were pretty rigorous. And so I can't stress enough the quantitative analysis and data analysis skills that are needed. A lot of what is on the cutting edge of economic analysis is actually done in programming languages. So R and Python and some of these other languages. GIS is a geospatial software, so people can do mapping techniques and plot impacts and trends spatially, which is really fascinating. I don't know that there's much many courses at UP that interact with kind of that spatial analysis, but it is really fascinating. And for my industry, real estate, land use, all of that's really important. So statistics, data analysis, some coding skills, I think all of that would go really, really far. In grad school, I learned a program called Stata, and already it's getting edged out by R and some of these other programs. So that's what I would really stress. And hard statistical skills and those harder skills are really, really good in terms of setting yourself apart for business students in particular, and in a recessionary market that gives you an edge on your job prospects. I think that's one of the reasons I got a job in the finance sector, was because of my math minor, and I could show that I could do the work and understand the core concepts.
Definitely. Well, Madeline, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming on. We all learned a lot. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. Thanks for having me, and good luck to all the students out there who are thinking about an economics degree and graduating soon.
All right, guys. Tune in next week for another episode of the UP Economics Club web series. Thanks for watching. This is Jackson Kent signing off, and until next time.